Alright, for this video we're going to look at solving quadratics. Alright, for my class, remember to leave the space on the side so you can write down any kind of questions that you have regarding the notes, so you can ask me tomorrow. If not, this is just a brief overview on what solving quadratics is about. So if we take a look, the solutions or solving, when we're talking about functions, we always talk about solve for x. So what does that mean for a quadratic? So solve for x for a quadratic on the graph is where it crosses the x-axis. So if I just drew a quick graph right here, alright, this is my x-axis, this horizontal line, where my y-axis is this vertical line. Alright, so where it crosses the x-axis, for example, if this were a parabola drawn, I'm just going to draw it with pencil real quick. Alright, just kind of a crude drawing of a parabola. If it were there, where it crosses that x-axis are going to be my solutions. So if we remember, our solutions are also known as roots. They're also known as x-intercepts, which kind of supports that whole crossing the x-axis thing. And it's also known as zeros. Alright, why zeros? Well, if you take a look at it, this point right here, the y value for those points in both cases is where y equals 0. So that's why they're referred to as zeros along with x-intercept solutions. And why roots? Well, the quadratic is something squared. And when we undo squared, we take the square root. So that's why those four words all really pretty much mean the exact same thing. Solutions, roots, x-intercepts, and zeros. It's all the same. So what we're talking about is finding the zeros. So graphically, well, it's real simple. You look at the graph, to see where it crosses the x-axis. Now, this might mean that you have to graph it first. So if you don't currently have it graphed, this may not be the best way to do it. To do it algebraically, there are several methods. Okay, you've got factoring, which would be in another video. You're going to have the square root method. And the quadratic formula. Now, where factoring and square root method may work some of the time, quadratic formula works all of the time. Okay? So quadratic formula is going to be the way to go. It's your fail-safe. You can't go wrong using this formula. So what is the quadratic formula? Well, it's the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Well, where in the world does this a, b, and c come from? Well, it comes from that standard form that we used, or we showed you on yesterday's video. So that standard form is a times x squared plus bx plus c equals, in this case when we're solving, it would need to equal 0, because the solutions are where y equals 0. So instead of setting it equal to y, we're going to set it equal to 0. And it would need to equal 0, else you're finding the x values at some other point. So you would pull your a, your b, and your c directly from your standard form. Meaning you can't have it in vertex form to use quadratic formula. If you have it in vertex form, it's just going to be easier to graph it. Quadratic formula must be in standard form. So it must start in standard form. And must equal 0. Must be equal to 0. Okay, so those two things are very important. Must be in standard form and must be equal to 0. Well, the quadratic formula gives us more than just solutions. Within the quadratic formula, there are two smaller formulas. So, okay, and your two formulas are your axis of symmetry formula. Remember, we talked about the axis of symmetry is that vertical line that goes straight up and down through the middle of your parabola. So that's an x equals the opposite of b over 2a. And in addition to your axis of symmetry formula, you've got your discriminant formula. Which is the b squared minus 4ac. So if you take a look, if we put those two things together with a plus and a minus, you have the whole thing. So it breaks it into this part right here. It's your axis of symmetry, and this is your discriminant formula there. Alright, so we'll use these two smaller formulas going forward. But to go back to the quadratic formula, alright, it can be used to solve. So if I said solve using quadratic formula. And again, given it in standard form, you can use the quadratic formula at any point. If I just said solve, you could use this formula. So let's do some examples. So if I had 2x squared minus 7x plus 4. Alright, that doesn't look like anything I'd want to factor anyway. Right, the first thing I'd want to do, step 1, is identify my a, b, and c. So in this case, a is going to equal 2. B is going to equal, take the sign with it, negative 7. And c is going to equal 4. Okay? So once I have those identified, I'm literally just going to get like Glade and plug it in, plug it in. We're going to literally just put them right into this quadratic formula that I have up here. So I'm going to start with b squared minus 4ac. Alright, so if I plug in the whole thing, the opposite of b becomes positive 7 plus or minus square root negative 7 squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. Okay? Again, I'm just going to start with this part under here. So negative 7 squared minus 4 times 2 times 4. So this is 49 minus 4 times 4 is 16 times 2 is 32. So that just equals 17. So I'm going to have 7 plus or minus the square root of 17 over 2 times 2 is 4. There's nothing else I can do with that. And in both cases it's x equals because it's the x values. Well, there's nothing I can do with this. Now, this is two separate points though, because of the plus and the minus. What this really means is 7 plus the square root of 17 over 4 and 7 minus the square root of 17 over 4. But it's very much so accepted as 7 plus or minus the square root of 17 over 4. Just be aware that it is two different points, it is two solutions for the graph. So what I would like for you to do on a separate sheet of paper is solve the following 3 problems. And this is what will need to be brought in and turned in tomorrow. So we're going to start off with x squared minus 2x minus 8 equals 0. And we'll do 2x squared plus 3x minus 5 equals 0. And then we're going to go negative 4x squared minus 2x plus 3 equals 0. All right, so that will be your homework. I expect to see those 3 problems worked out and turned in tomorrow. Have a great night.